Joining us tonight. Once again, I want to thank Lisa Roussel and FedPoint, which oversees the Federal Long-Term Care Insurance Program, for co-hosting these training sessions with us. And I want to thank all of you that are on this evening for joining us. It's a topic that I think is very pertinent for our members and for others to hear the information, to know that if you get that dreaded call about the boss wants to see you in their office, what exactly should you do? Because for many of us, it can be a very panic-filled moment when that happens. So with that, I am pleased to have Bill Judge, who is one of the members of our National Adverse Action Committee on, that's going to be doing the training for us tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over right now to Lisa to do a welcome, and then we'll turn it over to Bill. We can't hear you, Lisa.
It would help if I unmuted, Dan. Sorry about that, everyone. Sometimes that happens. Listen, I want to thank you for having me this evening. It's a pleasure to work with UPMA. And I just would like to say that at the end of the presentation that Bill conducts, I'll just be taking about 5 or 10 minutes just to go through some slides so that you have an understanding about the Federal Long-Term Care Insurance Program, who can apply, when you can apply, and so forth. So with that, I will turn it back over to Bill, who I'm going to pass him the ball, and Bill will be able to present. So thank you all.
All right, good evening, everybody. Let me get this presentation mode and we'll be on our way. There we go. All right, so like Dan said, I'm on the National Committee for Adverse Action. I have been a state chapter member rep. I started back in 2004 doing that, and then I was asked and fortunate to be asked to be on the national committee. That was in 2016, and I've been on that since then. Like Dan said, the dreaded phone call or email, or sometimes in the past they've even paid a personal visit. But there should be instructions to attend the interview. Either just make sure that you make notes of that. If it's not in an email, if it's verbally over the phone, make sure that you get the particulars correct, because we don't want to make any mistakes with that and not be there or miss it, or make the POOM or whoever is doing the interview any more disgruntled with us. So it specifies if it's an investigative interview or not. And it also includes your option to be accompanied by a rep. Anytime you're being interviewed that could lead to corrective action, you have the right to have a rep there. Or on a lot of times now, I know in COVID, we were doing a lot of them where we would just be on the phone and it was basically like a three-way call. It would be in my instance as a postmaster, the POOM is my boss, and it would be in that context. So you have the date, time, and location, the reasons for the interview. Sometimes if it's an issue that the POOM has tried to get you to do something and you've not been able to do it or whatever, that should be in there. And other things, I know a couple of cases where the folks knew ahead of time that something had gotten messed up, and that's why they were being interviewed for discipline. And we should always ask this question: if it's not in the email or the phone call, could this interview lead to discipline? Before the meeting, stay calm. I know that's easier said than done in a lot of cases, depending on your personality. If you don't know who your chapter member rep is in your area, contact your chapter president, and they will make sure that you're assigned a chapter member rep. You got to confirm availability of the rep, and if they can't be there at the time and date that the manager has given you for the meeting, it's not unreasonable to request a change of schedule. So just keep that in mind. And you always want to have a meeting ahead of time with your rep prior to the interview so that they can ask you details and different things about, you know, what it's about and what led up to it. And, you know, there's a myriad of possible problems or situations or different dynamics that happen to us and can put us in a situation where we do have to have a meeting with the boss. And one thing I want you to do is always follow the advice of your UPMA rep. I've had different folks that have, after it's over, reached out to the POOM or reached out to someone in the district or sent some, you know, emails or things like that, and we don't want to do that. We want to be respectful, and we want to make sure that we follow the processes that are laid out in the ELM, and that's what we're going to follow. All right, so at the meeting, another thing, stay calm again. This is not your day in court. You are there to answer their questions. So we don't want to start the defense until we answer all their questions. Always answer all their questions truthfully. That is a requirement that we do that. One thing that we always run into too is answers should be short, precise, and not elaborate. Less is more. Sometimes when they ask a question, if you expound on the answer, it may lead to additional questions and you may end up going down a road that you're not really wanting to go down. So we need to be truthful, but just remember that less is more. And if you're, you know, if you can keep it to a sentence, keep it to a sentence. Remember, your rep is there to take notes and to intervene only if necessary. Under no circumstances should a boss become disrespectful to you or belligerent. And if they do, at that time, the rep should step in and call them out on it, basically, is what I would say. We do take notes. We generally ask for the questions ahead of time so that we can just write your answers to the questions. And that's to make sure that we do have what you actually answered in your words documented, and if we have to move forward with in the appeal process. I generally, and most people I know, ask to speak with the manager in private following the interview. That's to get a feel for what they're thinking. You know, sometimes they've tried other things and it doesn't get our attention. And so then they do the investigative interview because we're not listening, or other things could be in our way too. So just make sure that if he asks to speak to him in private, I mean, it's just for that reason. We want to get a feel for what the manager's thinking, because that's basically once it's over and they have to determine what they want to do with it. And we'd kind of like to be involved in that if we can. After the meeting, stay calm. And this is the hard part because it's a waiting game. Because prior to issuing any discipline, they have to consult with labor, and depending on the severity of it, it can have to go to the law department. If they're going above a letter of warning, they generally have to get law department approval, which will be after they write it up and send it to them. They'll be looking at their notes and their PDI questions, and then they'll determine whether it warrants what the manager's asking for. In this situation, no news is good news, because basically the longer that it goes, the better. If we don't get anything in 30 days, then we will reach out to the manager. Sometimes that's not unusual. I've seen where they send it to the Labor Department, or the area law department. It can take, them 4 to 6 weeks for them to look at it and go through it and basically make sure that everything that they're saying is accurate, and they want to be accurate when it comes back to us. One other thing I would caution you about is do not discuss your situation with others, and we don't want the rumor mill out there in the Poon group or the field or the office or the plant, wherever we're at. We just don't want that churning with because we all know how that works. The initial statement, by the time it gets around, is nothing recognizable. So that's why we just don't recommend that you discuss your situation with others. If discipline is issued, contact your rep. And that's one thing that I want to reiterate, because try to do it the same day that you get it. It's very important. And we'll touch on this in a minute. There's timelines in there, and procedures that have to be followed, and it's important because there have been situations where, we're at almost 2 weeks before they even reach out to anybody, and at that point, it's really hard to come up with a defense and get the appeal ready and everything. And there again, we're back to do nothing without the guidance from your rep. So if you get that, your first step should be to contact your rep, and because it's going to, the letter or the action is going to be broken down. There's going to be specifications, and it's going to go through what they say in the letter that you have done wrong. And then the rep will go over them with you and start preparing the defense. I know it's easy to get mad and send off a message that we probably shouldn't. So just, like I said, just make sure that you're talking to your rep and getting guidance from them. After you get your discipline, it's going to be upsetting, and sometimes it's even traumatic depending on what they're proposing to give you. But you do have appeal rights, and that's where we come in. We want to make sure that we are there to follow the process and meet the appeal timelines. So, as I mentioned a moment ago, we will, you should jointly review the charges in the discipline. And do they have merit? Be honest about it. We do make mistakes. And the what happens after the mistake has a big play into what you get, basically. So just make sure that if it did happen, let your rep know that it did happen, and be honest. I can tell you, in cases, there's nothing worse than having something come out that me as a rep knew nothing about, because the member was either embarrassed by it or for whatever reason didn't want to tell the whole story. So prior to the appeal meeting, we'll discuss any acceptable compromise. You only get one appeal with letters of warning and 2 appeals levels for letters in lieu of no time office suspensions. With anything above a letter of warning, you also will get a mediation offer. So keep that in mind. Letters of warning are spelled out in the ELM, and actually all of the corrective action for non-bargaining unit, which is us, is spelled out in Chapter 650 of the ELM. And if you got time and you can read it, you know, it wouldn't hurt to read it. It does say in there that they are supposed to try to do non-disciplinary corrective measures, and the actual written part of it doesn't happen until those doesn't correct what needs to be corrected. So, the letters of warning will be issued by your immediate supervisor, and it should contain the specific reasons for the letter and a statement of applicable appeal rights. Now, this next part's very important. Letters of warning remain in your file for a period of 2 calendar years. And if it's true, or some of it's true, our biggest thing that we want to do is get that time reduced. 2 years is a long time, and in today's environment with dealing with employees and things like that, there's too many bad things that can happen. So if you are cited in subsequent disciplinary action, it continues to stay into that original letter of warning. So we don't want that to happen. So that's why when we have our meeting after the interview with the manager, we'll try to get a feel for that also, if they would be open to something like that. So now we're going to talk about what gets us in trouble. First and foremost, misuse of postal funds. And there's a number of different things that comprise postal funds. If you're in a level 18, or you have the stamp stock in a 20 or 21, basically stamps are postal funds. So the other things are e-buy and your, if you have a credit card, your purchase card, and you also have, if you have vehicles that are postal owned, you have your fleet maintenance cards, your Voyager cards. Those are all things that can be misused. Now, sometimes they aren't always misused by the postmaster, but we are ultimately responsible. So that's why we need to be on top of our game in our office. The second one, falsified records, time cards, and tags. We used to have a lot more paper. We're more on the computer now, and it makes it very easy for district folk to keep track of what's going on. We all do. If we have rural routes, we have to do RMSS every day, and we have to put those times in. I know of situations where we don't want to show our carriers out as late as they might have been out. Say that there's, from things happen, and you have a carrier that's out past 6 o'clock, and you don't want that, because that's another thing to answer for. So there's been times when managers and supervisors and postmasters have put in false times in the RMSS program so that it doesn't look like they have carriers out late. That's just something that is a no-no. Always just be honest. If they worked it, they worked it. If they're out that late, they're out that late. It begins before that. When you know it's happening earlier in the day, you need to reach out to your boss and say, hey, we're having a situation. I got somebody new on the route. They're not doing very well. Maybe the truck was late. Maybe mail's heavy. But if you get that information out before it happens, then there's no need to not put the accurate times in there. Same way with city carriers and tags. I remember a situation in Dayton, Ohio, where there was a manager that went over and was swiping the carriers back off the street, not off the clock, but off the street, because if you had carriers after 7 p.m., that was another telecon, and They just didn't want to be on it. They didn't want to answer for it. But there are so many other ways now with, like I said, the electronic monitoring, that those kind of things are not things that you can get away with. Money order irregularities and kiting, less of an issue with RSS because it tracks all your money order numbers in sequence. If you have an RMPO or a manual unit, I don't know too many 18s that are manual, but if you're in a manual unit and you can sell money orders out of order. Now, what that does is that sets up a red flag with the inspection service and the OIG, because the issue dates are what are the things that they watch. So don't borrow. You got a bill you got to pay. Don't take a money order out of the middle of the deck and make it out and send it in for it and then pay it back on payday. That is not acceptable. That is what kiting is. Something that is, and it happens to this day, mail samples and supplies. A lot of times we get in things, samples. It's actually covered a little bit too in the UBBM is handling. There's things that come through that have T-shirts in it and pens and cups and all assortments of things. If it's not deliverable, then it is not ours. It's not even supposed to be used for office use. The only exception to that is if there's samples that you are going to donate, and you've got to get district approval for that. You can't just donate to a charity or whatever. You have to get make sure that everyone knows, and there's no mistakes about that. The pens, I know a lot of times when you go in offices, you look at the pens that are on the desk for the supervisors or the carriers are carrying, they may say somebody's name or a business name that's closed. They got a pen that came in, it was UBM, so they just took it out of the UBM so that they could use it. That is something else that should not be done. Untimely audit of credits. We have, and especially in the manual units, or if you have SSKs and things like that, RSS is pretty much tracked. They're tracking that pretty well. They can send out a report. They know exactly when you've done your audits, what audits you've done. But in the manual units and like in the RMPOs, I have an RMPO, and periodically the finance at the national level will send an email saying that it needs to be counted, and you get 2 weeks to do that. So just make sure that you're complying with that. If you have individual credits for your clerks, they have to be counted every 4 months, because otherwise the clerk can't be held accountable if their drawer is short, and then it falls back on you. So just make sure that you are doing your audit on your credits as they are due. WebBat's not current or inaccurate. I actually had a case where that was the postmaster, for whatever reason, she had some problems keeping her WebBats current. She had payments that were made, and then they weren't entered into the system correctly. A lot of customer complaints, because anybody that deals with WebBats knows that if that payment's not by the 10th, those boxes are automatically closed. And then at that point, the customer has to pay an additional fee. I think right now it's $22, but they have to pay an additional fee to get that box reopened. So just make sure that we are doing the right thing, and we're taking care of that. Other SOX irregularities, retail credit card e-buy. You should have an e-buy for any expenditure on a credit card. You should have an approved e-buy. Now, that being said, there are emergencies, and I know wintertime is usually when it happens a lot in our area. We get a snow and we don't have that e-buy all set up for the snow removal. but we got to get it done. Or I have my RMPO uses natural gas, and they buy it from a company locally. So before they buy it, then I have to get an e-buy approved so that I can use my credit card to pay them. Other reporting irregularities, delayed and undeliverable mail. In today's world, where the plant sometimes or the trucks don't get there on time, we can be put in situations where we may end up with mail that we can't get out for delivery. That stuff has to be reported. There's programs for that. Or if you're not part of the CEDARS program, then you obviously need to notify your manager, whoever your next higher level manager is. We cannot just delay mail without someone knowing it and someone knowing why. We have had instances, and recently even during this COVID time with staffing, I mean, as less than 2 weeks ago on a Monday, we did have an office that did not get all the mail delivered. Our district, for the most part, if you can't get the mail delivered by 2100, which is 9 o'clock at night, they generally, the district manager will call the carriers off the street. So they're the only ones that can make that decision, and that all has to be reported through the chain of command. So just make sure that if you are doing it, you've reported it, and you follow the other things that we need to do for delayed or undeliverable mail. Failure to dispatch mail, that qualifies under the delayed mail thing. There are different situations, though. Say that you leave before your truck gets there, you come in the next morning, the mail's still there. So when that happens, your first call should be to the district, or not the district, but your boss, and let them know what happened. And from that point forward, your day might be a little screwed up, but they'll walk you through, or we'll walk through and work out what needs to be done to get what mail can be saved service-wide, and then the rest of it that needs just to be dispatched in a normal fashion. Misuse of a computer. It is okay to do, and I don't do it, but it is okay to do some personal use on a computer. I would recommend you don't, just because who determines what excessive is? I had a supervisor years ago when I was in OIC. I came out and she was shopping online, and so we had a little discussion, and she quit doing it because it just leads to trouble, and it also could appear bad to your employees, which when that gets out, then that doesn't reflect well on you or the Postal Service. Same way with improper email use. You are not supposed to send emails outside of the postal network unless they are to customers or something that's necessary in your business to conduct the business that you do. I have customers that have trust accounts, and from time to time I will have to send an email outside of the postal network to let them know there's something that either we need to check or there's something with their account or something. Alcohol, drug abuse. If you suffer from that, number one, make yourself available for EAP. Call, get an appointment set up, and work on it that way. Don't let it can ruin your career. I had one thing about being old I remember a lot. There was a postmaster one time that his son had the drug abuse problem. It ended up being a problem for him because he was basically paying the legal fees and that, and he did some things that he shouldn't have done. So just try to nip that in the bud as soon as you can. And if you do have problems, whether they're, everybody has problems, but just make sure that we're doing the right thing. Sexual harassment, that is a no-no. We take that training all the time. It can be done employee to employee, it can be done employee to manager, and it can be done manager to employee. If you have any inkling or there's any rumor on the floor about something happening, you need to reach out to your boss and get the advice and follow whatever procedures that are appropriate for what's going on. Nepotism, basically that's you're not allowed to hire anybody from your family or close friends to work at the post office or to do work on, say that you got grass that needs to be cut or something like that. It should not be any one of your relatives or anything like that. Sending MPOOs inappropriate emails, as much as that may give you satisfaction, don't do it. I generally, and it's usually my MPOO's pretty good. I usually don't send him anything, but if I'm getting ready to send an MPOO an email to someone, type it out, let it sit, and go back to it, or send it to someone that a friend of yours or a colleague in your network, and let them look at it and see if they think that there's anything wrong with it. And lastly, inappropriate social media posts responses, Facebook, there's Pinterest, there's just a bunch of them. We have to stay away from commenting on things. We think that, it's not bad, but it's all in the perception of what people think when they see what your post is or your response to something. So just be careful with that. There's a couple of postal groups out there that post every day. Some of them, some of the craft-oriented ones are not very nice sometimes, and we as managers are, we're basically representing the post office at all times, so we cannot do that. All right. Any questions? Looked like someone was speaking, but I couldn't hear them.
So I can unmute folks if anyone has a question. I would have to take the ball back or they could certainly type the question in the chat or the Q&A as well, Bill, and I'm happy to read that.
Whatever's easiest for the group.
Yeah, let me just see. I can view all attendees. I can unmute people if anyone's interested and they have a question. I see a few different people here. Since you're presenting, yeah, I don't see any question, but
You want me to stop sharing? And
Thanks, Bill.
all right, Dan, no problem.
All right, Lisa, you want to take it away for your presentation?
sure. Let me share. Let me start to share. Oh. Trying to get the ball back here. Okay. Very good. Thanks, Bill. That was great. Very informative. Everyone, I just want to thank you again. And some of you may be familiar with the federal long-term care insurance program, and some of you may not. And so really my job is just to provide education and awareness. I'm a senior account manager. I work for a company called FedPoint, and not only do we administer the federal long-term care insurance program, but we also administer benefits, which is the federal dental and vision program. And as you know, this is something that people can apply for at any time. This is not just an open season benefit. A lot of people think, because of the FedVIP, federal and dental, and when you're selecting your health insurance or you're making changes to the FEHBP, that's always during open season, unless obviously there's a qualifying event. But this federal long-term care insurance program actually was enacted by Congress back in 2000 because they thought, hey, we need to provide a program for federal employees, postal employees, military, active and retired folks that allows them to get some assistance with long-term care or have some kind of care or program in place. So that was back in 2000. In 2002, we were awarded the contract and we've had it ever since. So what I'd like to do is just make sure that you are aware of the program. And if you're not interested, then certainly share it with qualified family members who are eligible and who might be interested. And that's really the biggest directive that I have this evening for you. So what is long-term care? And again, I don't plan to take long. I kind of go through these slides pretty quickly, but long-term care is simply, it's not skilled medical care, and that's something to remember. It really follows the activities of daily living. So when you can't get in and out of a bed, transferring or continence or toileting, bathing, dressing, or eating for 90 days or more, or let's say you suffered from a major cognitive impairment like Alzheimer's, that would constitute a long-term care event. So that's what we're talking about. We're really talking about custodial informal care when we're talking about long-term care. Today's reality is people are living longer. That's great. That's wonderful. New technology, new prescription drugs, all these wonderful things in the medical system. But the problem is that the longer you live, the higher probability that we're all going to need care at some point. And as I always say to everyone when I'm doing these presentations, and again, I'm a certified long-term care consultant, we work a lot with civilians. I'm out there doing education to various agencies. U.S. Postal Service is one of the large agencies I work with, NASA, USDA, courts. We also work with military. One of the things that I always say, it's not a matter of if we need care, it's a matter of when. And what I always tell everyone is to think about who is going to pay for that and who is going to take care of you. So what's going to pay for this type of care that you're going to need, and who's going to take care of you. So the cost of long-term care can certainly derail your retirement. So really what we're talking about is planning. And I know that many of you have worked hard. You're working for the Postal Service. You probably have your retirement plan, your estate plan, your financial plan. My question to all of you, and something to think about, is simply, what is your long-term care plan? Have you had a discussion with your family members? Have you talked to a financial advisor? And have you looked at what kind of money or what you're going to do for this type of care? In terms of benefits that don't cover long-term care, a lot of people have this preconceived notion that long-term disability is going to cover, or the FEHBP. Couple of points here. Just remember that long-term disability insurance is there during your working years. It's money that's there as income replacement. When you retire, you don't have long-term disability anymore. So that's really not covering custodial care. In terms of health insurance, remember that health insurance covers acute diagnosable conditions that we either recover from or stabilize from, but in no way does it cover custodial informal care. Remember that when we talk about custodial informal care and we talk about long-term care, most people don't go in and out of long-term care. That's something to just remember. They don't go in and out of long-term care. And as dismal as it sounds, most people don't recover from a long-term care event, and that's just the reality. So when you go on long-term care, generally some people can be on for 2-4 years, or they can be on long as 10 years. In terms of TRICARE for Life, same thing. It's, it covers acute diagnosable conditions. So you can't rely on the FEHBP or any of the health plans to cover custodial informal care. Medicare, just so you know, is a rehabilitative benefit on a short-term basis. It is subject to restrictions. It's more on a skilled nursing facility. So people usually go to a skilled nursing facility when they need rehab. I know when my mother was sick 2 years ago, my mom passed away. She was in the hospital for a number of days, and in order to go into a skilled nursing facility, you have to qualify. So you have to be in a hospital for 3-night stay, not in an observation status, but in an inpatient status, and then you're discharged, and then you go to this skilled nursing facility. So again, there are various benefits equated with Medicare. So go to medicare.gov if you have any questions. I'm definitely not the expert on Medicare benefits. In terms of cost of care, when you're thinking of retiring, just a couple of points here. You can go to our website, ltcfeds.com. But when you think about retiring, you want to think about living in an area where the costs of goods and services are affordable, they're cheaper, taxes are less. You also want to think about what are the costs going to be, not only in today's dollars, but what are those dollars in the future for nursing home? What are the costs going to be for home care? I can tell you that our experience with the federal long-term care insurance program, and I refer to it as the FLTCIP, is that most people want to age in place. Most people want to be at home and they want to be cared for by loved ones and they want to be in their familiar surrounding. So, but there are people that want to go to a nursing home, and there certainly are people that just want to go to an assisted living facility. So you can see how these costs vary across the country. You can see how San Francisco compares to Phoenix, Arizona, maybe supply and demand. We have more nursing homes in Phoenix. So go to ltcfeds.com. Just another point I want to make here is this is for 5 days a week for 5 hours of care for a home care. Remember that care, when you're caring for a loved one, when we're talking about custodial care, it might start out with a few hours a day and then it becomes 24/7. Generally, what we see is people start needing assistance with instrumental activities of daily living, like bathing. No, that's activities of daily living, instrumental activities of daily living, like shopping or, taking care of their pet or house cleaning. And then it gets to the point where you start to see some of those ADLs, those activities of daily living slipping. Maybe you might see that one of the ADLs that becomes compromised is bathing. And so what happens is family members will really jump in and they start caring for that loved one, and it becomes 24/7. That's when they get totally overwhelmed, and that's when they seek outside assistance. How can the FLTCIP help you? Just so you're aware, it protects enrollees' retirement plans. If people want to leave money to their heirs, this is a great way to protect your retirement plan. It allows enrollees to stay at home as long as possible. As I said, most people want to age in place. It reduces family member stress. It is one of the most stressful life events, caring for a loved one. So anybody tonight on this call, on this training, you know that if you ever cared for someone, it is stressful and you just don't know when the end is in sight. Sometimes, my mom lived a whole year. She was very ill, and it got to the point where she needed 24/7 care. And we really spent a lot of the assets on her care. In terms of facilitating informed decision making, so we have registered nurses that are there to assist you throughout your plan of care, and you're not left high and dry kind of being in a program that you don't understand how it works. So you have assistance and they're there for you. In terms of the coverage, just so you know, you can age in place at home, you can go to an adult daycare center, much like those of you who may have dropped your kids off at a daycare center. It's a very similar situation. Your adult goes, your mother or father, let's say, just goes to this facility. They are supervised, there's entertainment, they're fed, and then you pick them up. Assisted living facilities, nursing homes, and hospice facility as well. Really, the big takeaway here is who's eligible. So federal and U.S. postal employees, active and retired members of the uniformed service, and then qualified relatives. And the big takeaway here for all of you is, even if you're not interested in this, share this with your spouse, your domestic partner, and adult children, age 18 and over, because they are eligible to apply. Your parents, parents-in-law, and step-parents. Again, your parents, parents-in-law, and step-parents of eligible employees and active members of the uniformed service. So they're eligible. Once you retire, however, your parents, parents-in-law, and step-parents would not be eligible. So if you're thinking of having them apply while you're still a postal employee, definitely do that. In terms of surviving spouses, if they receive a survivor annuity, they are also eligible, or a death benefit. Coverage details, just premiums are based on your age at your time of your application. So just remember this, that age is the #1 determining factor when people apply for this coverage. And I can tell you that the average age is somewhere between 52 and 53. We're starting to see that number come down. I think with COVID, a lot of attention was put on nursing homes. A lot of people decided to leave nursing homes. They wanted to age in place. And simply just, I think a lot of people are starting to look and saying, well, what is my plan going to be? So, the conception could be, long-term care is expensive. It can be the later you wait. So what I would recommend is if you're interested in this program and you do want to apply for this program, apply before your next birthday, and also know that it is a medically underwritten product. And what that means is there is insurable and uninsurable conditions. So basically not everybody gets in. And I can tell you that it's not easy to get into this program. So there are questions on that application, you can go to ltcfeds.com, you can fill out an application, you can call and speak to one of our program consultants, but there are certain questions and they clearly list those medical conditions that might prevent you from getting in. ALS is one of them, MS. There are various conditions. If you are diabetic and you're insulin dependent, that is an automatic strikeout. So again, it tells you, you know, if you continue to say no to these questions, then you just keep applying. But automatically, if you said that you had any of those conditions, then we would just simply say you would not be eligible. In terms of coverage, coverage is fully portable, so it goes with you wherever you go. So if you decide to leave the Postal Service and you apply for this coverage while you're working or when you're retired, that's fine. If you decided to go work for ABC Bank, your coverage will continue and it's guaranteed renewable as long as you continue to pay your premiums. That's all. And remember, qualified relatives can apply even if you don't. A few points just in closing here is that the FELTSIP program is the largest long-term care insurance program in the country. It's sponsored, it's underwritten by John Hancock Life and Health. And remember, John Hancock has been in business for over 150 years. And it is sponsored by OPM. Everything we do is approved by OPM. These slides are approved by OPM when we're going out and we're presenting and doing education awareness about this program. As we're here this evening working with UPMA, you know, co-sponsoring these trainings, everything is approved by OPM. And also another point I always like to make is that FELTSIP premiums are held in an experience fund, and that is separate from John Hancock's other assets. So we're there to pay claims. We paid over $1 billion in claims, and it's there to pay administrative costs. And then, of course, we have high performance metrics to meet as well. So some resources for all of you. Program consultants are available to answer your questions from 8 to 6 p.m. You can go to LTC Feds if you want to do some research, if you want to look at rates, if you want to look at how to set up a program. I'm not going into all the details of the program. We can do a full hour presentation, but you can go to our website. There's actually webinars that you can listen to. I have done numerous presentations for the U.S. Postal Service, and so we could certainly include you on that invitation as well, that when we work with headquarters, if you're ever interested, but definitely reach out, and you can certainly reach out to Dan or myself. Dan can provide my contact information. I know we don't have too many people on tonight as we usually do, but so planning tools, brochures, and applications are available as well, so you can download. A couple of last points in closing. You know, if you do decide to apply for this coverage and you get into this program, please share it with your family members. Let them know that you have a policy. It doesn't happen often, but I have come upon 1 or 2 people who have shared with me that they did not know that their parents or their relative had a policy. They exhausted a lot of the money that was that could have gone to heirs and in the estate, and they just didn't know they had a policy. Second of all is have the conversation. If there's anything you leave here tonight, it's what is your plan? What's going to pay for that, and who's going to take care of you, and where do you want to age in place? Do you want to be at home? Do you want to go to an assisted living facility? Do you want to go to a nursing home? And are you prepared for that? So those are the big takeaways. So with that, I want to thank all of you for your time and attention. And Dan, I'll turn it back to you to do any closing or any final remarks. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. Again, thank you for your partnership. Bill, thank you for your presentation. And those of you that are on, thank you for getting on and taking part in this training. If you found it valuable and you want to let other people know about it, we will have another session a week from tonight. It will start at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We're putting out some more information on that, but thank you everyone for getting on. Thank you to Lisa and FedPoint for co-sponsoring. And with that, I will say good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you. A pleasure. Thank you.
Everybody.